Hey, Nick, can you breathe underwater? Nope. Well, this better be a quick list then. That's right, it's time to talk about H2O Games.
So these are games that are based in some capacity around water. That could be like the setting. Water could be one of the main resources in the game. We just thought it'd be kind of an interesting thought experiment, being like, what's a game
It's like really water-centric.
water-centric, or at least water is a big, big part of it. This list is kind of be all over the place in terms of what games are on it.
But it'll all have water.
A lot of games that have a lot of water in them. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Also, you might see our shirts change. They don't. That's an illusion.
Don't worry about that.
It's an illusion.
That's not actually happening.
Doesn't matter. Let's get our top 10 games based around H2O. Our number 10 H2O games is actually a game called Sink or Swim. This is a game about synchronized swimming. And this is a game that we played. Bézier sent us a copy of it. We played it with our friends Paula Deming and Shay Parker. And this is one of those games where it seemed fine, right? Like, it's one of those games where we're like, this seems like it would be a fine game. And we had so much fun. This is a game where you're all putting on a synchronized swimming. So you have these different cards. Cards have colors and numbers. And you essentially have different rules in each round, and the rule will be like everyone has to play a pink card, and so everyone has to do that. Pretty easy. But then the next round, you have to follow that rule plus one more. The synchronized swimming essentially is getting longer. You know, the theme is there. So don't at me. The theme is there, and so, but nonetheless, you're essentially each round you're getting more and more of these rules that you then have to follow, that everyone has to put down these cards, and you can trade cards with each other very easily, but you're on a timer. And so you're doing all this fast, and then there starts to be all these like plot twists where like all of a sudden now only one person, like the captain of the team, can speak, no one else can speak, and it just keeps getting crazier and crazier and crazier. But as you go along, you get better at the game as you're going through these different rounds. And then you start to get strategy like, okay, this rule right here is one of the easier ones. So let's make sure we do this one first, and then let's make sure and you kind of go through and systematically do it, and you get better and better and better. So even though the game gets harder and harder, you're able to keep up with it. And it's really, really fun. It was shocking how much fun we had with this game. And I really implore you to try it, because just from the outset, we were kind of just like, this seems fine. And it was probably one of the biggest surprises I've ever had in a game ever was Sink or Swim. It was so much fun. And it's about synchronized swimming, so it's in water. Don't at me. So number 9 for H2O games is Wreck Raiders. This is a game where you are scuba diving down to various shipwrecks looking for like treasure and stuff like that. It's a really beautiful, light, accessible game where you are moving your scuba divers over to various wrecks. And then you're kind of using dice. And if you're using a die, you want to, and each of those wreck sites and in the beach, you're going to like one of 6 numbers. And so based on the dice that get used and stuff, whoever's in that slot, that number slot, will get to gain treasures and things like that. And you're kind of ultimately doing simple set collection. As you collect these tokens and stuff, you can turn them into complete these kind of like artifact cards that are going to need certain colors in a certain order to kind of maximize on these cards, which will get you points. They might get you a little bit of a bonus, like these shells, which you can use in different ways. Or you can start collecting the treasures for what's on the other side, where you might get different golden artifacts or jewels and things like that. And those are going to kind of go into your personal vaults, that you might showcase in the future. And you're going to kind of build rows and columns of those types of goods. You kind of want to get as many of the same type of good as you can and kind of fill those things up. You can also build aquariums because you clearly love the water and want to have like little awesome sea creatures in aquariums. So you can kind of focus on those 3 areas. You can do a little bit of each. Really hardcore focus on building like giant aquariums or whatever you will. But it's kind of fun because you can bump people off of their spot when they go to the beach. And so there's kind of, not in a way that makes the game too open, but there's kind of no bad options in the game in a satisfying way. You're kind of just trying to think of like, how do I go to a place to make sure that I benefit a ton and get to draw a bunch of these tiles at once based on being in the right spot at the right time and using the right die and maximize, what I can kind of do on my turns. But it's all done in a very family way, accessible way.
And like, to me, it just gets into the fun of like, I just want to explore for treasure deep beneath the sea and, you know, in your scuba gear and whatnot. It just seems really exciting. So they do it in a really fun way with a great tone. That's Wreck Raiders.
Number 8 is a game we've talked about before, and that is Deep Sea Adventure. This is a game where you are diving deep down into the water, and you are trying to collect treasure. This is kind of a push your luck game. I've never won this game because I will always go to the bottom and try to get all the treasure, and I never survive, ever. But I don't care. I'm always going to do it every single time because one day it's going to work, and I'm going to crush it. It's going to be amazing. So basically, you are going down this line of treasure, and you can pick up this treasure as you're going, but the problem is when you pick it up, because you're picking up big, heavy stuff, you start to move slower. And you, at one point, can choose to turn back to go back to the submarine. Everyone is coming out of the same submarine, going back to the same submarine, and you all have a limited amount of oxygen that you're all breathing together. So you do not want to be the last one out there because then you're just going to die. And it's very fun because you're just pushing your luck and trying to go down as far as you can go because the treasure, as you go farther and farther down, it's going to be worth more points. And so you're picking it up, but then as you go, you can like start dropping stuff. It's just have you start moving faster to try to get back to the boat in time, and I never ever do, and I never will. But it's all about just that kind of like diving deep down, that kind of like, was it agoraphobe? No, agoraphobe was a different one. Thalassophobic, I think thalassophobia is what it is. The fear of like deep water or the fear of like dark water or whatever. That's kind of like this game. It's super, super fun. It's just a, tiny little oink game. Push your luck. It's super, super fun. You can teach it to anybody. It's great. In water.
So now I'm not going to lie. When you think of Forbidden Desert, you don't think of a lot of water, but that's the key of the game is you are trying to survive violent sandstorms, the sun beating down upon you, and your water is your life in the game. If you run out of water, it's over for you. So this is a cooperative game in which you had a kind of a steam sail ship. It's kind of steampunky, crash landed. All the pieces of the ship were strewn all about the desert, and you need to recover all the pieces of your ship to reassemble it and get the heck out of there before you run out of water and perish in a probably not fun manner. So we love this one because it's all about managing that water, and it's very important in a setting like a desert that's very harsh environment with sandstorms to manage that water. Your water is literally your life. So while this isn't the wettest game that we have, it is one where water serves such a crucial function. There's times where you might be able to refill your canteen, but it might dwindle ever lower. And if anyone ever, again, runs out of water, you as a team are out. So it's a really fun one, really great co-op. If you like kind of a pandemic, this scratches the same itch. It's made by the same designer. So it gives you little powers and things you can focus on. Really simple action types. And you're kind of just trying to deal with the chaos the game is providing. It is you versus the game in a great, great way. So that is Forbidden Desert.
Number 6 is a game all about water because you are the water, at least one of you is, and this is Land versus Sea. Land versus Sea, not Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, and also not Air, Land, and Sea. It gets confusing, but Land versus Sea, which is a game by Good Day Games, and this is a game, it's mostly a 2-player game, but again, you can play a 3 or 4 player. And basically, you're flipping over tiles, kind of like Carcassonne style, and you're just grabbing a tile, flipping it over, and placing it somewhere. And again, one player is the land, one player is the sea. And basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to just close off areas. So on the various tiles, there will just be parts of it will be land, parts of it will be sea. You place it somewhere, and the landscape always has to make sense, kind of Carcassonne style, where you can't have a road go straight into a building. You know, you can't have land go straight into sea. You have to have everything make sense in terms of how you're building it. But as you're building out, you'll start making these land masses and these sea masses. And what you want to do is close them off. You want to have a complete where there's land all the way around the sea or a sea all the way around the land. And whenever you close something off like that, you will gain points if you're the character of which got closed off. That was in a sentence. Don't worry about it. But if you're the sea character and you finish off like essentially a lake, you will then get points. And so throughout the game, you're essentially trying to make big areas to close off and also kind of trying to like force your opponent to close stuff off for you, because if Mike, who's the land player, closes off a sea, I'm the one who gets those points because I'm the sea player, I'm the water player. And so you're trying to do that, and it's very fun and very tactical, but pretty darn easy, especially like just the little base game. It's just a really good time. And it's just kind of, you're just doing that and just trying to close everything off. It's pretty darn quick, and it's just really satisfying. I don't know. It's kind of got that same kind of Carcassonne vibe where you're laying out tiles, making stuff make sense, and just trying to close stuff. And they say in the rulebook, like, hey, don't try and do like one giant thing because it's going to be very, very hard to close off. And it's true. You kind of want to do a bunch of little stuff if you can because it'll be easier to close off. And then in the game, there's a couple different modules. There are like mountains and coral reefs. So if you're the land player, if you put mountains next to each other, you'll score extra points. Coral reefs work the same way. There's also like trade routes on the land things and the ship parts. And so there's also like different modules you can add to add a little bit more complexity, which is super cool. But Land vs. Sea is really, really fun. And it's just a banger of a little two-player game. We really like it a lot. Really excited to explore it more. Yeah, it's really good. And you get to play as the sea, so water.
Now, there's a lot of games out there that feature water. There's not many games where you are the water, and indeed weather, and that's Petrichor. Petrichor is a game all about weather, where you're not like people on the ground trying to science the weather. You're playing as the weather, and you are trying to effectively do area control and get the most of your little beads, which are water droplets that represent you in the game, into clouds. You're moving those clouds around. You ultimately want to rain down and kind of have the most presence on each of these tiles to grow stuff, because water is life. And so this, from the very beginning, it's a beautiful looking game for one. And this is one that right from the start, we're like, I don't know of many games that are more unique than Petrichor. It is such an interesting way to go about area control. It's so interesting to play as not an animal or not a person, but as just weather, and the cards you are playing will affect what your pieces do and stuff like that. And we're like, that is so cool. The way that clouds, as you're going around, you're in these like actual little trays that are clouds. If you add too much water, they become thunderstorms, and the water kind of gets more volatile. And as you're playing out cards, you're kind of voting on which type of card would be most prevalent, but it's kind of a ultimately easy, accessible kind of game in terms of what the cards are doing, but it creates this really interesting area control battle as you try to have kind of the right amount of water in the right places and make use of certain actions to move things around, and just in a very beautiful, very appealing package. So Petrichor is just awesome. It is literally a water game through and through, and that's why it's on our list.
Number 4 is a game called Blue Lagoon. This is a Reiner Knizia game. Thank you, good doctor, for making another great game. And this game is kind of set in like the kind of Polynesian Maori people, kind of thing like Moana and stuff like that, big kind of catamaran boats. And basically the board is lots of different water and then a bunch of different islands, kind of uninhabited islands that have a bunch of different resources on them. And you are the kind of Maori people who are coming and finding these islands. And so when you start the game takes place in two halves, and the two halves play mostly the same. But basically, when you're coming in, you have to come in through the water, because that's how you got to these islands, is you had to sail there. So you're coming in, and all your chips are either a sailor on one side or kind of like just a normal villager on the other side. And basically land and sea. And so if you're placing a piece on the water part, you put the sailor up, or you put it on the land part, and you're basically making lines. You're just making lines of your people and trying to collect resources. You're trying to collect resources. You're also trying to have more of your people on an island than your opponent. You're also trying to touch all of the islands if you can. There's a couple different ways you're trying to score, and you're basically just making lines of your people out there as you're basically going through and exploring these islands. And that's what you do. And then you will score. Again, you score area control for each different island, and then you score for how many islands you got to touch, and then you score for your resources. But on top of putting down resources, on the islands, you can put down these little huts. And these little huts will stay there. At the end of the first round, this first half of the game, you'll score, and you'll take off all your pieces with the exception of your huts. And now for the second round plays exactly the same with the exception of now you have to go out from where your huts are, from where your little villages are. And so now you're not always coming from the side of the board because you're sailing there. Now you're established and now you're exploring again. But the scoring, everything else works the exact same way. But where you put your little villages really matters because it's going to help you a lot in the second half of the game. And it's super simple. It's Reiner Knizia. It's not a heavy game, but it just works. It's really, really pretty. It's got great art, great colorful pieces. It's super simple because on your turn, you literally just put out one of your chips. If it's going on land, you put it villager side up. If it's going on sea, you put it water side up. That's it. That's all you do. That's the entire game. It's really, really elegant. It's really just good. I like it a lot. And it's set in that kind of Polynesian, like archipelago, beautiful world that's all based around water and you're sailing around. And so we thought it was really, really cool. Blue Lagoon is a game that doesn't get talked about enough. It's a really, really great Reiner Knizia game.
So number 3 paints a sort of bleak, view of the world, although it is very cool. This is Underwater Cities, where they basically say there's too many people, going to Mars is too far, so we're going to build down below the ocean, under the sea. In Underwater Cities, you are building up a kind of network of cities connected by tunnels. These cities are in domes and stuff, which is like a really cool, actual idea of could we live in the ocean? What would that look like? And you are doing a kind of ramp up of production in this game. You kind of start off with not a lot of ability to generate money. You can generate kelp and stuff via your kelp farms, which are going to be a lot of the food you can eat. You have these kind of desalinization plants, I never know that. Things that take salt out of water. You get it. Plants and stuff, which will generate a lot of money. You're kind of working on science. And as you upgrade the things you build and all the types of domes you can do, you are going to get bigger and stronger production at kind of 3 key points in the game where you kind of do all of your production. You get all this new kind of hit of resources and you go out and you're trying to build out, again, these tunnels and cities on your own little player board. You're kind of trying to build the best, most well-connected network of underwater infrastructure as you can. So the thing that comes down to for this game is you're always playing a card on your turn and taking an action. And actions kind of go around the board, and they're sort of in 3 sections. There's one section where the actions are kind of weak, a middle section the actions are kind of fine, and then a section where they're pretty strong. And if you can manage to play a card that matches the color, red, orange, or green, you also get to do what's on the card's actions. And they have the inverse, where green cards, pretty strong, the actions are pretty weak. Orange is sort of all around fine, and then red, the cards are pretty weak, but the actions are strong. And that creates a really interesting kind of balance because you don't have to match colors on the cards, but I at least get fixated on trying to do that. So I get to do more stuff on my turn, but how and when do I use these cards and what's actually the most useful thing to do and how do I best use my resources, which at certain times in the game can feel really tight. You don't have a lot and you got to kind of make the best of what you got. So that kind of balance between action selection and the card play and the interesting setting, and of course it's very much focused on the water because you're finding out how do I live down here, is really interesting, and that's why it's on our list. That is Underwater Cities.
Number 2 is a game that we have to put on here because the setting is all about water and it's absolutely gorgeous, and that is Tidal Blades. And real talk, take your pick of Tidal Blades at this point. We're just going to say Tidal Blades Hero of the Reef, the first one. But the second one, which is much more of a dungeon crawl, set in the same universe, but it's a dungeon crawl, that came out on Kickstarter last year, I believe, or maybe earlier this year. It was definitely earlier this year. Time isn't real. But basically, that also was really, really fun. There's also, I think, Banner Festival that's right here, which is like a trick-taking game set in Tidal Blades universe. Also absolutely amazing. But as you can see, in this universe, you are kind of like water-based people, kind of like fish people to some degree. But there's also like humans and like big old caiman and turtles and stuff like that. And you are Tidal Blades. And Tidal Blades are kind of like these big, I was going to say gladiators, but kind of essentially big heroes. They're heroes that saved the world Niviri from these kind of big Kraken-type monsters, all these kind of monsters. And in the first game, you're competing in kind of like Olympic Games. And what you're doing is you're basically trying to impress the judges and become the next Tidal Blades. And then in the next game, which is the Dungeon Crawl, which again plays nothing like the first Tidal Blades, you are all now Tidal Blades. It has the exact same characters, but you're all now Tidal Blades because during the first game, the monsters are kind of starting to break into the reef. In the second game, now you actually are out fighting these monsters because they have fully broken into the reef. And then the third game, which is just a trick-taking game, you are actually merchants selling stuff in like the stands of all these different like arenas essentially, where you're just out like selling hot meat on a stick, being like, hey, that's cool Tidal Blades, right? Hey, you got some meat on a stick. And so it's like there's all these games set in different parts of this world, but the world is this really wonderful, beautiful world called Nibiru, made by Mr. Cuddington, a wonderful duo of artists that are so good at what they do. But it's just this big jet ski water world, and it's absolutely amazing. I love Tidal Blades. I love the first one. I like the second one. I like Banner Festival. They're all great. Tidal Blades is amazing.
So our number one is number one because it's been in our life a long time. It's what sparked the idea of this list. It is Abyss. This is a game by Bruno Cathala where you are these different factions, or rather you're kind of incurring the favor of these different factions of sea folk, these kind of merfolk that come into, they're kind of in these different factions. Like I said, there's like the farmers, and there's sort of like the politicians, and there's like the mages and things like that. And they come into, they're all coming down here to kind of like meet and stuff like that. And you're trying to play out cards and move pearls around. You're kind of paying stuff with this like pearl economy, which is really cool, to incur the kind of influence of these politicians to increase your station down there. You want to have as much kind of power as you can. So this game is cool because it's ultimately very accessible, very lightweight, with a really kind of like amazing theme on it, where it's kind of one of those that, like, that doesn't make sense. The theme and the art stuff, this is so cool, and I want to see, like, a big game with this. But it's ultimately kind of like a light card game. Because what you're going to do is you're going to flip over a card that's going to have a value, and it's going to be associated with one of the 5 kind of suits. The crabs are sort of like the military, more aggressive faction down there. But if I want that card, I have to offer it to everyone else first. And someone can buy it off me for a pearl, and then I'll draw another card. And if no one wants that, I can decide, do I take that or do I draw another card? So it's a bit of push your luck, because at any point people can kind of buy the cards that you want, but there's an escalating cost, and of course they have to pay you pearls for that, which makes you a little bit more able to buy stuff in the future. You can instead turn in sets of those cards and those values and stuff to gain the influence of, like, a farmer might need 10 worth of yellow and 1 other color. So I can turn in those cards to get like a 5 and a 3 of yellow and a 4 of green. I'll overpay a little bit, and I can recruit a farmer, which will give me points. A lot of the characters will provide one-time abilities, ongoing abilities that mess with other players, that break the game in different ways. And you can also get these locations, which will open up various types of endgame scoring and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun things to ultimately explore, but your turn comes down to, like, turn in some stuff to effectively buy a card, collect some cards, or do that kind of drawing out cards one at a time and offering it around. And that's really kind of the most of the game. But the world is like, oh, I want to see a movie with this, because you have like all this political intrigue with like the squid folk and like seahorse people. And it's one that I'm like, man, this could be pretty cool. And I guess we have like Aquaman is maybe the closest we'll get to that. But it's one that, like, right away I was like, this theme, especially because we came to it early in our board gaming career, feels like, you know, something that transports you to a faraway land. So Abyss, of course, has to be on our list. It's all about the water and living under the water and having, like, complicated political relations down there, which is really interesting to consider with all these, like, cool factions of sea creature humanoid things. So that's number 1, Abyss.
All right, so that's top 10 water games.
I know, kind of all over the place, but I like it. We also haven't played some games like Barrage. I'm sure some people are like, what up, Barrage? We haven't played Barrage. I want to play like Pandemic Rising Tides, because that's like you're trying to stave off the water, you know?
Let us know what other water-based games that we need to try, and we'll try to get to those.
Indeed.
Put those in the comments below, and we'll check them out. And until next time, everybody, I'm Mike.
I'm Nick.
You're the Brothers Murph. We'll catch y'all in the next top 10.
Bye, everybody.